Hi friends! Want to prevent dementia and hear about my 10 brain-boosting secrets to keep your mind sharp? It could be as effortless as drinking and eating with your friends. So when you do eat, why not eat a serving of brain-boosting blueberries to slow down memory loss like the thousands of nurses who participated in the Harvard Nurses Health Study since 1980. They also ate America's most popular berry, strawberries. And the women who saw the most benefit ate as little as one serving of blueberries and 2 servings of strawberries per week. And they slowed their brains aging by more than 2 years. Isn't that incredible? There is such a thing as a fountain of youth. And this is why I eat both of these delicious berries every day in a berry smoothie. And by the way, berries are the only fruit that I will pulverize because they have been shown not to elevate blood sugars, unlike drinking sugary drinks. However, I understand that you may live in a part of the world where fresh berries are hard to find. These are frozen berries. That's why they're kind of white looking. Frozen berries are just as good and oftentimes even sweeter. The other option is to eat astronaut food and get them freeze-dried. Did you know that freeze-drying or lyophilization was first developed during World War II to preserve blood plasma and medical supplies without refrigeration? And during the early space programs, such as Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, NASA sought food solutions that were lightweight, non-perishable, and easy to prepare in microgravity. And so in the 1960s, NASA collaborated with food scientists to develop freeze-dried meals that astronauts could easily rehydrate by adding water. And you can find a lot of those in camping stores. The Apollo mission that happened in 1969 through 1972 saw extensive use of freeze-dried foods. And they ate beef, shrimp cocktail, soups, and even desserts. The first time I bought anything freeze-dried was actually a freeze-dried ice cream sandwich at the California Science Center, and that was for my son to try. And freeze-drying, it basically removes about 98% of the moisture, so it makes the food lighter to transport. It also preserves it longer because it doesn't spoil or degrade. Unlike traditional dehydration, freeze-drying preserves most of the food's vitamins and minerals. And plus, freeze-dried foods rehydrate better than regular dried foods. Therefore, they are more palatable. However, I do understand that they seem expensive because a pint of strawberries typically weighs about 10 to 12 ounces. And freeze-dry removes all the water, which is about 90 to 95% of the content of a strawberry. The final weight of a freeze-dried strawberries will be only like 1 to 1.5 ounces. So that just tells you how much of your fresh produce is really water. Now, some people I know can't swallow the texture, and if that's the case, even blueberry juice is beneficial. Now, when I eat berries, I think of it as a savings account for my retirement. I'm investing in my health like I invest in my retirement account. And when you invest in the right funds in your retirement account, that could double or triple over time. But if you don't invest in the right funds, if you're not paying attention, your account could do nothing or even lose money, especially because inflation keeps going up. So if you're not checking your retirement account, then you may want to consider doing that. And it's recommended that we do that at least once a year. But really, retirement is something we should be doing every single day. Every day, you should set aside some money for investing in your future. And that's what I do every time I eat berries. I'm investing in the future of my health. Foods like berries feed your brain. Take a look at this color. You don't get this unless you are powerful. And in nature, these kind of colors, they're not artificial. They're made by polyphenols, phenolic acids, and alagitannins. These compounds together are considered to be neuroprotective, which means they protect your nerves. And the biggest bundle of nerves is your brain. So inside each neuron is a space called the cytoplasm. It's really kind of like a jelly-filled fluid for organelles to swim around like your mitochondria. So the cytoplasm of neurons is the leading site of oxidative damage. If you haven't noticed, there's a constant war between toxins in your environment and the survival of your nerve cells. And no matter how clean your diet is, even if you eat organic, there will be toxins in the soil that your plants and animals collect. My friend, she lives close to the Altadena fires. And if you haven't heard, recently there was a massive wildfire that eventually decimated the town of Altadena. It's a suburban city near Los Angeles. So for weeks, the combustion of homes and everything in the homes, from the lead paint to asbestos to formaldehyde treated wood to plastics, etc., burned up into ash, and those fumes were basically released and spread around the neighboring cities. Talk about toxic air pollution. So if you can see the air pollution from satellites in space, you know there are a ton of toxins. And eventually those toxins, they settle in the ground. So if you garden near where there's been a recent fire, like an urban fire, you may want to reconsider eating things from your garden. It will be covered with a pollutant on the surface. So you really don't want to use a leaf blower. You want to wash them off if you're still going to eat that. And then don't forget, your soil will be contaminated. You should probably get your soil tested. And when you're gardening, you really want to make sure you're wearing a mask, you wash your hands afterwards, and your clothes may also get ash and pollution, so that you don't want to be tracking your shoes and your clothes in your house either. Air pollution is a huge problem and kills millions of people every year. And don't forget, plants, they will absorb the pollutants in your soil. If you're a carnivore and you eat herbivores, well, those herbivores will eat polluted plants too. Animals accumulate toxins in their fat, just like us. Hence, this is another reason why not to eat animal fat. This is also why it's recommended that pregnant or nursing moms not lose weight. Because when you lose a massive amount of weight during pregnancy or when you're breastfeeding, well, you release a lot of the toxins. They go in your bloodstream, and that can affect the development of your baby. Unfortunately, if you collect more toxins, then your nerves can fight. The nerves will get damaged. They will die. And when they die, they form scar tissues made out of protein, and eventually an aggregate of protein makes a plaque. By the time we see plaques, the war is over. I have a few teacher friends who tell me really sad stories about how kids fight at school. And sometimes teachers get injured trying to break up the fights. But what if you got Shaquille O'Neal to be one of the teachers on campus? If Shaq came on campus, I think just his sheer presence would just command respect from the students and really would deter fights. So I think of polyphenols like Shaq. Their presence protect your brain from these toxins that are trying to wage war and constantly trying to fight with your brain cells. And of course, the more toxins you're exposed to, whether you're painting or gardening, the more polyphenols you need to keep peace in your brain. So the more berries you eat, the more polyphenols you have to protect your neuronal cytoplasm from oxidative damage to prevent scar tissue. Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now. Even if you weren't affected by wildfires, you are still exposed to a plethora of toxins on a daily basis in your processed convenient foods. Let's start with aluminum. Do you eat baked goods? Well, sodium aluminum phosphate was introduced in the 1900s. It's basically a baking powder. Or you can find it in your cheese to improve the texture and shelf life. We don't need aluminum in our body. How about trans fats, which are partially hydrogenated oils? They were introduced in 1911 and didn't get banned until 2018. Remember Crisco? It was widely used in processed foods in the mid-20th century. And even though technically it's banned, processed foods with trans fats are still on the store shelves because they are only required to label it if it exceeds 0.5 grams of trans fat. So if you had more than that, how do you think you could fudge the labels? Well, half the serving size. How about polysorbate 80? That was introduced in the 1940s. This is an emulsifier that improves the texture of foods like ice cream and salad dressing. What about artificial food dyes like red 40, yellow 5, blue 1? Synthetic food dyes were introduced in the 1970s to replace older coal tar-based dyes, and so now it's widely used in processed foods, in your favorite sports drinks, in candy. How about butylated hydroxyanisole or butylated hydroxytoluene? That was introduced in the 1940s as a preservative to prevent fats from becoming rancid in packaged foods. And guess what? All of these foods, they can cross a blood-brain barrier and build up over time. They wage war against your neurons. And in the end, you may lose your brain health. And food scientists, they argue that a little bit is okay. Well, really, is it okay? Is it okay that somebody takes a little bit of your money in your retirement account every day so that they can manage it? Financial fees over time is a lot of money. And these chemicals are, in essence, a fee for your brain health, adding up over time. These substances don't belong in your brain tissue. They don't belong in our bodies. They should not be in our foods. And your brain is very sensitive to foreign items in general. And usually it does a great job protecting itself from toxins, because it has a blood-brain barrier, which is like a checkpoint. And this protected network is made out of tightly packed endothelial cells that line blood vessels in the brain. So it basically acts as a filter, selectively allowing only essential nutrients like glucose and oxygen to pass, while blocking harmful substances such as toxins that I just listed and pathogens. However, when your body's inflamed and certain chemicals, especially food additives, can cause chronic inflammation, then it can disrupt your blood-brain barrier. It can allow toxins to pass. And ultimately, your nerve cells will lose the war at some threshold. And when they lose, they disappear. If your brain cells start disappearing, what do you think will happen to your memory? Yep, it's gonna disappear too. Do you have calluses on your feet? How do you think you got calluses? Tissue injury, right? So when you rub your shoe against your skin, that probably causes some redness and a blister, and then healing causes a collection of hard protein. So when your brain gets injured, the protein scar is hard, but the rest of your brain should be soft because it's mostly fat. 60% of the dry weight of your brain is fat. But when your brain is alive and in your scalp, it's not dry weight, it's full of water. And each cell has a ton of water, like strawberries. And when it's functioning right, you should be 75 to 80% water in your brain. So if you could take your brain out and feel it in your hand, it would be a squishy and fatty ball of glob. And why does the brain have so much fat? Well, fat's a great insulator, and it's insulating neurons. Neurons are like hot electrical wires. Do you want to touch a wire that's alive that has no plastic insulation around it? Yeah, I wouldn't do that. You'd get electrocuted. At the same time, that wire won't efficiently transfer electricity because it isn't insulated. And this is your brain. It needs the fat to efficiently transmit electrical signals. This way you can move your hand from a hot stove instantaneously. Now we literally can put electrodes on your head and measure these electrical signals that your brain emits when it's awake or when it's asleep or in different stages of sleep. Have you ever bought a new electrical appliance, like a blender, and the cord at the end has a cap to protect the electric plug? Now, what if you didn't take out the electric plug and you tried to plug the whole thing, including the plastic, into the socket? Do you think it would work? No, because the plastic is preventing the electricity to connect, right? The wires from touching. Well, this is what protein does. If you have protein clumps in between your neurons, then it will inhibit your brain cells from communicating with one another. Damaged neurons will collect more and more protein caps, and they become amyloid plaques and tau tangles. These are associated with Alzheimer's dementia. And unlike a brand new electrical blender where you can just simply take the cap off, protein plaques are permanent, like epoxy glue. Protein prevents the neurons from communicating with each other. Loneliness is truly deadly, and hence it's important for us to constantly eat foods that help our neurons detoxify, reduce oxidative stress, and protect our cells. Now, the strongest antioxidants are in soft fruits, like berries. These are anthocyanins, which give berries their deep, dark, brilliant colors. That's why even blueberry juice, even though it doesn't have much fiber, can be neuroprotective. Hence, fiber supplements are not longevity foods. The original fiber has the protective antioxidants, the polyphenols, critical for your brain health. Your fiber supplement doesn't have that. Berries are region specific, so if you can't find blueberries or strawberries, how about black currants? Now, people think that only old people get dementia. Well, I have a friend who's 50 and he has dementia. Do you think that's old? Dementia actually happens decades before the diagnosis. My friend grew up on processed food. cereal, Pop-Tarts. Literally, he was proud to be a sugar addict. And he said he would eat sugar right from the giant sugar bucket. His mom had a giant bucket of white table sugar. On top of that, he got into a lot of fights as a child, and he suffered multiple head traumas. And whether you're suffering from physical trauma from football or chemical trauma from eating processed foods, ultimately, your health will pay the price, especially if you're not eating the neuroprotective elements in your food. And unfortunately, you may not see the symptoms of the trauma until several decades later. And hence, it's really important that you avoid activities that physically or chemically hurt your brain. And that's why I no longer go on roller coasters. There's a lot of influencers who tell you not to eat juice and that it's as bad as drinking Coke because of the sugar content. And if you believe them, then you would really miss out on protecting your brain. Now, you don't have to drink the juice, but if you don't eat the real produce, then you may want to consider drinking real juice. Thousands of people who drink fruit and vegetable juice regularly actually reduce the risk of Alzheimer's by 76%. This isn't drinking flavored water, right? Not a sports drink. This is drinking actual real juice. And it's not just berry juice. In this prospective study, people actually drank a variety of juices from apple juice to citrus juices, which both contain high amounts of vitamin C and quercetin. Both vitamin C and quercetin, they can cross the blood-brain barrier, and they are neuroprotective against hydrogen peroxide. Your body actually makes hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, the stuff in your medicine cabinet that you keep to clean germs. So when it comes to your neuronal health, you need vitamin C and quercetin because they're both neuroprotective. But quercetin is actually considered to be more neuroprotective. Quercetin is another polyphenol that has been shown in many animal studies to be neuroprotective. But it also has anti-inflammatory properties, inhibiting inflammatory pathways like NF-kappa B and COX-2. And inflammation is a process that can form protein plaques. Aggressive, excessive inflammation. So when you're trying to heal properly, you need an adequate supply of nutrients to mount and tame the inflammation. And these nutrients require blood flow to get to where it needs to go. Half of America has high blood pressure, which reduces blood flow. But if you eat quercetin along with vitamin C, you can actually help to lower your blood pressure and increase blood flow. So lots of different plants have quercetin. But the highest component of quercetin is in the skin of plants. Blueberries have a lot of skin. Apples have skin, but a lot of people take that skin off. Nobody de-skins berries though. So that's why when you're drinking berry juice, you get some of the polyphenols in the skin. Citrus fruits, onions, grapes are also high in quercetin. Now another powerful juice is black currant. That has been shown to improve attention, reduce reaction time, improve vigilance and visual accuracy in people between the ages of 18 and 35. Too bad I didn't take advantage of all that when I was in college and medical school. But I did eat a ton of Fuji apples when I was at school. Now, when I grew up, there was only 3 kinds of apples in the market. Red Delicious, Granny Smith, or Fuji. And there's no way I would eat a Granny Smith raw. It's just way too sour and too hard for me. However, I liked Red Delicious, but somehow they were always so milly. So my favorite was Fuji apples. And my mom would buy me these giant grapefruit-sized Fuji apples that I would bring to my molecular biology class. It was my afternoon class, and I was usually pretty tired by then. So I would be in the back, probably in the middle, crunching on my apple during class. I did get an A in those classes. Now, don't confuse black currant with Zante currant. They're not the same. Zante currants are actually grapes. I eat grapes every week, and I only buy the dark red or purple ones. To me, they're like candy. And for me to tolerate the amount of sugar in grapes, I have to work out and keep my diet low in fat. It's really keeping my diet low in fat, because if you do that, you can tolerate more sugar in your diet. But I'm not eating candy, I'm eating actual fruit. And fruit overall is pretty low in sugar. And this is very different from scooping table sugar in a bucket. But it is absolutely healthy to eat fruit. Now remember how freeze-dried berries, like those strawberries, weigh 1/10 of the fresh counterpart? And that's the thing with fruit. It is packed with water. So when you eat fruit, you're actually eating mostly water, which protects you you from overeating, along with the fiber, which activates GLP-1 to get you to stop eating. Now, if you only ate fruit, you would lose a ton of weight because fruit is not only full of water, it's also low in calories and low in fat. So there is no way to get fat if all you ate was fruit. However, I do admit that some people who are severely insulin resistant, they can't tolerate eating fruit because it elevates their blood sugars. And if that's the case, you have either prediabetes or diabetes if you have prolonged elevated blood sugars. And the only way to know if you have insulin resistance is if you challenge yourself with something with sugar. Because you can have a false low blood sugar and false low insulin and not tolerate a glucose tolerance test. And so when you challenge yourself, you need to see how long your blood sugar remains elevated. Now, most influencers, they don't appreciate the history of nutrition. So your ability to tolerate carbohydrates was worked out a long time ago in normal, healthy people who were fed 4 different kinds of diets. Actually, technically 3. One group ate no food, one group ate high fat, one group ate high protein, and one group ate high in carbohydrates. And guess who had the highest sugar spikes? The people who ate no food or who ate high fat. And this is counterintuitive, right? And you would think that the more sugar you eat, the higher your blood sugar gets. But that's not true if you can keep your fat down. It's because we're confusing the symptom of high blood sugars with the cause of high blood sugars. When your mitochondria stops working, that's when your blood sugars go up. And the fastest, quickest way to kill your mitochondria is to eat saturated fat, or to make saturated fat when you overeat any calories. Hence, restricting your calories to lose weight, no matter what diet you eat, has been proven over and over to reverse diabetes type 2. So remember, when you overeat any calories, be it protein, carbohydrates, or fat, you will turn your calories into saturated fat, and that gums up your mitochondria. So unless you change what you're eating, if you're still overeating saturated fat, even though you're eating less, let's say on a ketogenic diet or on a carnivore diet or on a processed food diet, you will still be insulin resistant, causing high levels of insulin to be sent out to address your high blood sugars. High blood sugars by itself is normal. There's no data to tell us that short bouts of sugar spikes is bad by itself. The duration of time is what causes damage. If the sugar remains persistently high for a couple hours after you eat, that is not healthy because the sugar will keep your blood sticky. Sticky things don't move very well, right? That slows blood flow. Your blood and its components need to stay fluid. It's kind of like accidentally touching a hot stove. If you move it right away, then you don't get burned. But if you keep it on, then your tissue will get hot, red, inflamed, and blistery. But are you going to get rid of your stove just because you have the potential to do that? No, you need a stove to cook and to eat food. So this is why we all need to eat brain-protecting fruits. But to tolerate them, processed carbohydrates and saturated fat and meat needs to be reduced. They all contain high amounts of saturated fat, which clogs up your mitochondria so that you can't metabolize sugar, even though they are a healthy, natural source of polyphenols and antioxidants like fruit. Now, if I could pick just one grape to power my brain, that would be Concord Grapes. Concord Grapes remind me of a cell because it has like an outer membrane, and then inside it's a jelly-like flesh that lots of people turn into grape juice. And just drinking Concord grape juice for 12 weeks can improve spatial memory, which is really needed for good drivers. And the reason why the juice is purple when you buy Concord grapes is because some of those anthocyanins in the skin, they leak out. Now, many of you watching this video probably has been touched by dementia. You may be related or even a caregiver of someone suffering from dementia. And unfortunately, I know firsthand that journey as a physician and as a caregiver. And people really don't understand how difficult it is to both physically and mentally help a person with dementia, to be someone's caregiver and to keep that person happy and safe. And it's partly because the signs of dementia in the beginning are subtle and many people don't recognize it. And that's why if you're concerned about anything in this video, please talk to your own medical doctor. Now, the first thing that goes is your short-term memory. They can't find their keys or wallet, especially if they aren't in the habit of putting them in a certain place. They also don't recall conversations and may struggle with common names and words. Then they forget dates and appointment times, and they start getting lost. How many of you have spent hours looking for your keys and wallet? How about forgetting appointments? These are all common symptoms that can present several years before people are officially diagnosed with dementia. So when these symptoms appear, what do people do about it? Most people just ignore it. And if you think about it, when you first learned how to speak, how many times did you learn your ABCs? How many times did your parents repeat it to you? And how many times did you have to repeat it until you memorize your ABCs? And then how many years did you spend officially learning English? Over a decade, right? You put a lot of effort to develop these memory skills. And then when you're all done with high school, if you don't continue to learn, then slowly your skill sets fade away. During that time, you are exercising your brain. But people who continue to learn more and more, they go to college, they earn a master's degree, they earn a doctorate degree, they become a MBA or CPA or doctor, they reduce the risk of dementia. Why is that? Because when you focus on learning, you are growing more and more neurons. You're connecting them in ways that they would have never connected if you didn't think. And this is why it's important not just to watch TV or just to watch YouTube or other social media, but to actively participate in whatever you're learning. Put whatever you're learning into action. Study, quiz yourself, memorize these terms, and then share it with your friends. In medicine, we have a saying, watch one, do one, teach one. And that's how we all got trained. And if you all did that, watch this video and then live it and then teach other people, then you've turned something passive, this YouTube video, into something active, and it'll make you smarter. It'll make more neurons. In fact, the more social media you passively watch or TV, the higher your risk of dementia. And hence, we all need to learn daily, which is number 4. Learn something new every day. Make it an active exercise, a habit to learn. Active learning can be figuring out how to plant a garden, how to garden, or trying to figure out how to buy groceries. Or you can learn a foreign language or a musical instrument, or study the periodic table of elements. Learning is protective for your brain. And the more complex you learn, the more problems you solve, the more protective it is for your brain. And this is why working is protective from dementia. Early retirement is not unless you find another job. And hence I work every day. I enjoy working. That's why I enjoy making YouTube videos, because I get to learn and then I share what I learn. It's a very active process to engage your brain, trying to figure out how to share it with people. And I know it's very difficult to care for someone with dementia because that was my journey, caring for my mom. And she loved gardening, but she couldn't do it. And then I wasn't a gardener, but we would visit botanical gardens and I would have her read what plant we were looking at, have her trying to figure out if it was the right plant to match the labels, and then how it was applicable for her life, where she saw those plants before. And if you've ever raised a child, it's basically like teaching your children, homeschooling your children. I used to do the same thing. I would bring my kids to the zoo, show them the animals, make them read the signs, and see if they were looking at the right animal. And that's how you can engage people with dementia. But for you to prevent dementia, you have to also share what you're learning. Talk to someone daily. Socializing is protective against dementia, which is number 5. And when you socialize, you are exercising your brain. We have an epidemic of loneliness that parallels the rise of depression and dementia. And after my dad passed, my mom lived on her own. And she was too proud to live with any of her kids. And as a result, she spent years alone. Partially because when you grow old, you simply have less friends unless they make it. And it just gets harder and harder for people to make it in their 80s and 90s. When she was younger, she didn't have the habit of making new friends. So it became more and more difficult for her to do on her own when she was older. Loneliness is a significant risk factor for not just depression, but for dementia. And it's not just my mom. I hear lots of stories about parents that start showing signs of dementia after they are widowed. Hence, start investing in a community now. Call your old friends or go outside and talk to your neighbors. And if you don't have any of those, go try your neighborhood church. You don't have to be Christian to show up. And when you go to a Christian church, you automatically inherit a whole family, a whole community, because that is part of the Christian philosophy. And when you first meet new people, you may feel uncomfortable, excited, nervous, and happy. Social cognition, language processing, and emotional regulation, they all activate several key areas in our brain. Specifically, the medial prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, They both help to process social interactions, interpret intentions, and regulate our responses. The superior temporal sulcus plays a role in interpreting facial expressions, tone of voice, and social cues. Your amygdala is a region crucial for processing emotions, detecting social threats, and assessing new people's trustworthiness. And your hippocampus is important for memory formation, both past and future. And it helps us put social interactions into context about new people. Your anterior cingulate cortex, it plays a role in monitoring social behavior. It helps us to resolve conflicts in communication and adjusts our responses based on feedback. And there is also a mirror neuron system located in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal lobes. And this system helps us understand and mimic the emotions and behaviors of others. And then you have your dopaminergic system. Meeting new people can activate the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, which are involved in the reward and motivation, particularly when social interactions are enjoyable, like volunteering. In dementia, particularly when individuals do not engage in conversation and social interactions, several key brain regions shrink due to neuronal degradation due to lack of stimulation. And the main areas affected include hippocampus, the region critical for new memory formation and learning. It is one of the first parts of the brain to shrink with Alzheimer's disease. Your prefrontal cortex and your orbital frontal cortex, they help regulate social behavior, decision-making, and executive functions. They also atrophy when there is a lack of verbal and social engagement. And your temporal lobe, the superior temporal gyrus and Wernicke's area, which are involved in language comprehension, they shrink when language use declines. And your anterior cingulate cortex, the area that's important for attention and emotional regulation, that too shrinks. And in your frontal lobe, there is a Broca's area. This region is crucial for speech production. So when you don't use it, when you don't converse with people, that also goes down. Your white matter, your brain is full of white and gray matter. These pathways that help to connect different parts of your brain from the language to the cognitive regions, they will too go down when you don't use it, leading to further language deficits. And your thalamus, the structure which relays sensory and cognitive information, they too shrink if you don't socially engage. Unfortunately, there is no drug that will ever replace personal connection. And that's why in America, despite having the best, newest pharmaceutical drugs, hundreds of thousands of supplements, state-of-the-art healthcare, we can't get our rates of chronic diseases, especially dementia, under control. And why is that? Because too many of our elders are forgotten and neglected and sent to nursing homes or left alone in their homes. And we excuse the epidemic of dementia as a factor of aging. Our rates are rising. Unlike Singapore, people there live longer than the US, but their dementia rates are going down. Obviously, we have a lot to learn from the world. In Singapore, they understand how difficult it is for a single person to care for someone with dementia. And they have built communities to support people with dementia and their caregivers. It truly does take a village to raise a child and to keep that child healthy throughout their entire life. And until we invest in our own personal villages, we will never be able to lower our rates of dementia. Now, in theory, what I've just talked about sounds pretty easy, but we all know it's hard to implement because there are too many people in denial. I knew my mom was demented for years before I could convince my siblings. They refused to believe that mom had a problem. And this is not uncommon. One of my best friends, her boyfriend's mother, has dementia. She scratches her face. She stopped cleaning her house. And when confronted, she curls up into a ball on the floor. And this is very hard for her children to watch. If you talk to her, she knows her name, she knows where she's at, she knows the time and date. She can tell you that for now. But obviously, there is something wrong. And if you ask her to go to the doctor, she refuses. And unlike a little child where parents can pick them up and drive them to the doctor, it's really hard for kids to do that to their parents. As a result, many families, they remain in denial. It's easier to turn a blind eye. And they rationalize to themselves that, and mom does want attention. She's crying for help, except that help is not the traditional sense of just buying a medication. I don't want that to happen to my children. And that's why I work especially hard to keep my brain sharp. So I take a multivitamin every day. And did you know that several large studies have shown that taking a multivitamin improves memory And unfortunately, too many health professionals still don't believe multivitamins are helpful. They think it's just expensive pee. Well, good luck to them. I'm still taking my multivitamin, which is number 6. And you can randomly buy a multivitamin and take your chances, or actually put more thought in it and target specific micronutrients that you may be missing. I personally don't think we need everything in a common multivitamin. In fact, sometimes they put too little of the good stuff and too much of others. And if you put too much, you can actually make people feel bad. My friend bought a B complex and then she started flushing. Well, they put too much niacin, and that's why she was flushing. Despite billions of research dollars, there really is no effective prescription medication that can reverse the progression of Alzheimer's. But what if I told you that you can go to the grocery store and buy the stamen of a flower called Quercus sativus, otherwise known as saffron? And people with mild to moderate Alzheimer's who took saffron for 16 weeks actually had better cognitive function than those who didn't. Again, saffron doesn't reverse the underlying cause of Alzheimer's. But if you can improve their memory without the side effects of prescriptions just by eating saffron, that's pretty good. And so that's why I've been learning to eat the stuff myself. My friend bought me a saffron spray. Apparently, it's very common for Persians to eat saffron in their food. And now I've learned to spray it in my food. It gives it a slightly tangy taste. Reversing aging is what everyone is trying to achieve. And despite what lots of people think, supplements used in the right way have been shown to be beneficial, especially in people who are low in micronutrients, which is actually more common than you think. Take vitamin D and omega-3, for instance. On a paper published this February 3rd, 2025, in a well-respected journal called Nature, that article showed that taking omega-3 and vitamin D supplements on a daily basis along with regular exercise for at least 30 minutes 3 times a week actually appeared to slow biological aging on a molecular level by 3 to 4 months. And this makes sense. There are vitamin D receptors all over your brain. Your brain is full of omega-3 fats. And we are learning more and more that vitamin D activates more than just your bones. And if you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.